my GPA ended up dropping to a 2.7. Fast forward to first year of grad school, I ended up pulling a 4.0 in 30 hours per week. All right, so it is 9:03. Started gaining weight. I started breaking out because I was eating so much sugar. So busy with work that we don't have enough time to go to church on Sunday. One of the biggest things that transformed myself from who I was to who I became, that thing is rest. Like, praise God. So before I even get into this video, I want you guys to know what I have been through to just see why this topic is so important, why it's so relevant, and why it has so transformed my freaking life, to say the least. When I was a freshman in college, rest was out the window. It felt unproductive. So I was the type of person that would stay at the library until midnight. I was over caffeinated. I was eating sugar and caffeine to stay awake. Started gaining weight, about 15 to 20 pounds. Started breaking out because I was eating so much sugar. I was neglecting my friends and my family. I didn't care about rest at all. Second year of undergrad, my GPA ended up dropping to a 2.7. Fast forward to first year of grad school, I ended up pulling a 4.0 while working 30 hours per week, while volunteering at my church part-time, working out 3 times a week. One of the biggest things that transformed myself from who I was to who I became, that thing is rest. Like, praise God. But that was the most transformative thing that has made me become who I am today, and that is why I'm making this video. The book that changed the trajectory of my mindset and my life has to be The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and this is a book that has sold 40 million copies worldwide and has been translated into 40 different languages as well. In this book, Stephen talks about this man that is in the woods, and he is cutting wood using a saw. You look at the man and you notice 2 things. You notice that the saw that he is using is dull, and the second thing that you notice is that he looks freaking exhausted. Tell him, hey, you know, you looking exhausted. You should probably take a break in the saw. I think the work would go faster. And he tells you, there's no time. I don't have time to sharpen the saw. Saw is actually us. We're so busy with work that we don't have enough time to go work out. We're so busy with work that we don't have enough time to go to church on Sundays. We're so busy with work that we don't have enough time to spend time with our families. So Stephen talks about the 4 areas, or the 4 dimensions in our lives in which we can work on sharpening the saw. That is your physical, mental, social, or emotional, and your spiritual side. These 4 are going to be very tied into the video for today. So since I've started my journey of intentionally resting, one of the lessons that I've learned actually comes from this book called So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport, who holds a PhD in computer science, and he's a professor at MIT, and he's written like 7 books. He talks about this man named Joe Duffy, and so Joe Duffy does this really interesting thing where he promises his wife that he's going to be home at 5:30 every night, so in time for dinner. He works at Microsoft, and he's expected to complete these complex projects, and because his projects are complex, since like a computer scientist / engineer, software engineer, they're expected to stay in the office overtime, work overtime, take work home. Because of the promise that he ends up making to his wife, he ends up using his time very efficiently. He makes a significant contribution in this area called parallel computing. Because of his contributions, he ends up getting career capital, and using this career capital, he leverages this and gets a different job that allows him more autonomy, more control over not only his time, but the projects that he gets to choose to work on. So the major thing that had an influence on who he became and things that he's done is cutting out his time at 5:30, which forced him to use his time more efficiently, which forced him to do this deep thinking and deep focused work. The lesson that we can take away from this is there's a time for everything. There's a time to work, and then there's a time to rest. Finding a moment and a time when we say to ourselves, I'm done work, I'm gonna go chill with my family, relax. That is the lesson that we can take away from Joe. Definitely had an impact on my life. The second way that we can take control of our time is through what I like to call calculated rest. This is actually the Pomodoro technique. The Pomodoro technique is this method by which you work on something for 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break, followed by 25 minutes of working of deep focus, another 5-minute breaks. And so once you have 4 of those, you take a longer break, like a 30-minute break. The funny thing about this is something that I used in grad school to get my 4.0 GPA. For some reason, when we go into work, we tend to forget that this is something that works in school, but it can also help us in work. Telling myself that, hey, I'm gonna sit down and work on this thing for 4 hours, that feels really daunting. But the idea of instead saying, okay, this thing is gonna take me 4 hours, but I'm going to work on it for 25 minutes, take a break, 25, it feels like you're climbing a mountain, but you're taking breaks in between. And the unique part about the Pomodoro technique, something that you probably didn't know, there's this idea of recency and primacy effect. So if I give you a list of numbers to memorize, likely what's going to happen is that you probably remember the first few numbers and then the last few numbers. And so there's this idea of the recency and primacy. Times we remember what we saw at the beginning and at the end of something. So we're watching a movie and we know how it starts and we know how it ends. The middle is sort of fluff. Or we're at a lecture and it's 1 hour long and we know how the professor started the lecture. We know what he said at the end, but then, you know, the stuff that happened in between, a lot of times that's fluff. The more that you break up a task into little parts, you're more likely to have deep focus in those little sections and remember thoroughly the things in the task that you are working on. So not only will your work have more quality, but you're also producing work more efficiently as well.